why don't you kind of walk everybody through the progression we saw with them as we allowed, like what did it look like? What were the stages that you saw them kind of go through with things before we got them to a point where they were like really like playing and stuff?
Yeah. So, day one, you were obviously involved in that. We muzzled them up, obviously, just to see what the interaction was going to look like. And I was like, this is either going to be like nothing or it's going to be really
As it always is, right?
Yeah. So I was worried it was going to be nothing. And I'd just be like, oh, well, we can't, like we were talking about, we can't recreate problem behaviors in our facility. Mm-hmm. And sure enough, when we got them together, it was like the most intense
Before
fight.
we even let them together,
Yeah.
like I remember I was holding Eddie and you walked Brody in and he was just immediately like snarling and growling at him and stuff just as soon as he saw him.
Yeah. And you were like, let the leashes go. And I was like, really? We let the leashes go and it was just on contact. Like Eddie had some moves on Brody and I like remember feeling so bad for Brody. I was like, this poor dog.
Yeah.
And then toward the end of what we were watching, Brody very much had a piece of it because he kept going back. And like,
Every time Eddie would stop, Brody would kind of like go back
Yeah.
for more and like almost egg him on. Remember that like
Yeah.
butt swing that he was doing that first day? Like Eddie would stop. And to clarify like what it kind of looked like. So right away when they went at each other, it was kind of both of them. They jumped up the paw thing and stuff and it was just like, right? And same deal. We kind of step back, let it play out. And it kind of like stopped for a second, then they went back for more, then stopped for a minute, they let back go. Then Brody kind of stopped, and Eddie just like kind of like mounted him and would just like muzzle punch his back a bunch of times, you know? And then same deal, that just kind of progressed for a while, and then Brody kind of looked like he was trying to get away and stuff, and then Eddie stopped, and then we started seeing over the course of, what was that, maybe an hour, just over an hour, something like that we had them together for. We saw the first maybe 10 minutes, it was pretty quick. Like if there was a break, it went right back to them kind of trying to like punch at each other and dominate each other and do all that other kind of stuff, right? And then we started seeing just like, it was like fewer and further in between. Like they would stop for a minute and they would kind of like go off to the other side of the room and like take a breather, then kind of go back at it, then go off to the side of the room and take a breather, then go back at it. And over the course of that session, we saw it go from pretty much like, again, the on contact to it ended with them just totally exhausted, like on opposite sides of the rooms, just like laying on beds, just like, or staying away from each other, like on their own. Yeah. You know what I mean? And part of that may have just been they were tired, right? A part of that may have been they realized it wasn't working. Like neither of them were really giving into it too much, you know? But ultimately they chose to just go put them somewhere else, right? And a lot of people, I'm sure honestly like 95% of trainers or more, if we showed them that entire clip of that session, which I'm still so pissed that we didn't take video of the whole thing, but it was like just Bridget and I there, and we were like, we got to keep our eyes on this right now. But if we showed them like that entire clip, and also let me triple clarify, like neither of the dogs were getting like injured by this or anything. Like it was set up in a very safe, controlled way. We even went as far as like we did their nails and stuff before, so they weren't able to scratch each other or anything like that. And obviously they had very safe, secure muzzles on, and we were in a position with their e-collars and drag lines and stuff where at any point we could have stepped in and intervened if we needed to, right? But I'm sure 95% of trainers or more, if we showed them that entire clip, would have immediately been like, they should have just been corrected for it right away, right? But here's the thing, right? We saw over the course of that, like we talked about, if you look at the spectrum, we saw it go from them trying to correct each other at this level 11 intensity to them organically on their own learn that they could do it with less. Right? They learned that they can get it. Like even when they started doing the mounting and stuff like that, it was from that level 11 intensity to like whatever, let's hypothetically say like a 7 or something if we had to put a number on it, right? On its own. And if we corrected for that, all that would have done is suppress it completely, where it would have went from level 11 to level 0 without them learning they could do it with less. And here's the thing, right? I'm not a believer that, like, there's a time and a place for corrections. And we're going to get into a scenario of like an in-home assessment that I did the other day that we showed on the vlog here, where I did use a lot of corrections and stuff to kind of mitigate the issue a little bit. But if we don't allow them to figure it out at some point and you just correct it anytime you see it, in my opinion and in my experience, what happens is you get this false sense of them just avoiding each other. And then anytime they get in close contact, they can avoid each other until they can't avoid each other anymore. And it explodes into that highest level. You know what I mean? And that's where you see the dogs are good for a month. They're good for 2 months. And suddenly that one trigger happens that just totally freaking sets them off. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, corrections have their time and place with this kind of stuff. Like, we have to know once we've had them kind of figure out their issue, that we could disengage them still and we still have proper control over them and stuff like that. But that's not ultimately what's solving the problem. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So anyway, sorry. So that was the first time that we put them together. So what did we kind of start to see after that as we were working with them?
So I think it was like the first 2 sessions we saw that intense fighting, that very intense, like Eddie on top of Brody, just like going at him. And then I think like the 3rd or 4th time, it was just like they would come in the room and ignore each other. And it would...
I do remember that.
Yeah. Like going on opposite sides because they knew that nothing was going to come of the fighting. So it was interesting to start to see the dial turn a little bit, and those little wins led to like when you were like, well, let's take them off muzzle, and you had a session, so Michelle and I did it. And I remember like finally unclipping the muzzles, just like it was like slow motion, just that unclip, and then the muzzles coming off, and they kind of like looked at each other, and they were really stiff, and I was like heart into my chest, and then they were like silent slow motion, and then they started playing and running around and just being complete idiots. So much fun. And I remember like looking at you and I was like, I want to cry right now.
It was a really beautiful moment.
It was.
And I remember like before we took the muzzles off, we were like, okay, you're in charge of Eddie.
Yeah.
I'll get Brody
Yeah.
if anything happens.
What?
Exactly.
So obviously I remember like I was getting ready to go in my session. I was like, I told you guys, I think I was like, well, like I want to do the off muzzle stuff. And then I think I was walking away. I was like, you know what? I was like, if you guys feel good with it, just fucking do it. You know, what made you guys feel like, hey, like this is the time that we should give this a go?
I just felt like it had reached a point where that intensity had dialed down so much that it wasn't as grudgy. And when they were getting together, they were like trying to figure each other out, and it looked playful. The body language looked like okay.
Yeah.
So we decided just to take a chance. We had all the precautions necessary, so we said, like, let's just try it, and it ended up really, really successful.
Yeah, that was cool.
It seemed like we'd seen them like many times communicate successfully with each other and it not escalate past a certain point, and then it almost felt like the muzzles were impeding their ability to actually play.
Yeah.
And so it was almost like the muzzle was no longer a safety precaution and more like a cause of frustration almost in the interaction.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah.
And so that's when I felt like that they were ready for that.
Yeah.
And something I remember seeing, I think maybe the session before that or something that was like, because I think you were gone. Yeah, you were gone for a little bit because you had COVID. And
thanks for that.
And I was putting them together and stuff like that, and I started seeing that. Yeah, same deal. Like there was no like intensity as far as like they were trying to fight each other, but Eddie still was doing that. Eddie's signature move is the like jump on the back. You know what I mean? And initially when we saw it, it was pretty intense and it was jump on the back and try to bite the back kind of thing. But then we just started realizing like that's like his move, you know? Like
and
with
like Brody's butt swish.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, like it was so funny to see that in the beginning as like part of his fighting. But then in the end that was like his main go-to play move.
Because it's the same thing. You know what I mean? Like fighting in the play.
Different.
It's the same thing, just on a different part of the spectrum. It's so interesting, you know? But yeah, like that was really cool when we saw that, and then we did it again the next day, obviously, and like it was like at that point they were just like best long lost buds, you know, like they were just like they got it right, and they got it on their own, which I think was the coolest part about it.